r/Nosleep. Posted by TPSavage. I just saw a Craigslist ad for myself. Part 2. I marched through a dense forest, morning light filtering through snow-covered branches. My hands were zip-tied behind me, the rough hand of one of my kidnappers on my shoulder, urging me forward. One of my captors, a bald man with emerald eyes, had opened the basement door one day and said it was time to go. He'd shoved me in the trunk, and a few cramped, uncomfortable hours later, I found myself here in the countryside. I was being led to a small cottage, purple flowers growing out front, a river running behind it. It was a far cry from the abandoned industrial building I had imagined, but still didn't do much to calm my nerves. It was like entering a room with a picture frame askew. Although I knew something was wrong, I couldn't quite pinpoint what it was. The two men ascended the steps and held open the door, a black chasm that even the morning sun couldn't illuminate. My fevered mind conjured up a plethora of horrors waiting inside for me. They looked at me expectantly, but I didn't move, icy fear freezing me where I stood. One of them, the same bald man from earlier, grabbed my collar and dragged me inside. Although the room was dark, enough sunlight filtered in through the drawn curtains for me to make out some rough shapes, a sofa here, an armchair there. The lack of any obvious threat helped me to relax, but only slightly. The bald man flicked on the light switch, but nothing happened. After a few more useless clicks, he growled and turned to go outside. "Damn, power's out again. Tie him down and then come out here and help me." The other man, a lanky fellow with small beady eyes, zip-tied me to a nearby radiator and left to join his partner, shutting the door behind him and leaving me in darkness. That's when I noticed it. Opposite the room from me, was a figure. It sat on one of the couches, arm outstretched toward the TV, holding what could only be a remote. It was far too still to be a person, but that didn't leave many other options. Was it a statue? A mannequin? Mannequin seemed to fit. It was the only solution that explained the unnatural stillness of the thing. My eyes were beginning to adjust to the darkness by this point, and I realized that mannequins were everywhere. Two stood in the center of the room, holding each other like they were in the middle of a slow dance. Another one sat at a dining table just a few feet away, holding a fork between its fingers, raised to its lips as if to take a bite. Wait a second. Fingers? Did mannequins have? Click. Light suddenly exploded into the room, blinding me momentarily. I opened my eyes to see the grisly sight before me. Every single mannequin was a person. Their pale, thin bodies were held up by wires that stretched to the ceiling like the strings of a marionette. Their dull, vacant eyes lead me to think they were dead, but after studying them closely I realized they were breathing, albeit shallowly. The man watching TV slumped on his couch, slowly blinking every few seconds. The hand that held the remote was a bluish-gray from the cut-off circulation. I turned my head to the figure who I'd seen sitting at the table and had to slap a hand over my mouth to keep from sobbing. The girl was slim, gaunt even, and barely out of her teens. Her big hazel eyes, sunk deep in their sockets, lifelessly stared at the plate of fake food in front of her. My heart ached for her and I strained against my bindings to get closer. "Hey," I whispered. "Can you hear me?" If the girl did, she didn't show any signs of it. I realized that everyone here must have been drugged somehow. "Listen, my name's Robbie. I'm gonna get you out of here, okay? Don't worry." Even as I said the words, I knew they were a lie. I tugged against my restraints, but they didn't even budge. I was about to try kicking the radiator when I heard the door open behind me. Before I could turn around, red-hot pain exploded into my head. I collapsed backward, blood leaking from my forehead, and stared up at my attacker. An old man loomed above me, his weathered face scowling down at me. "Down, boy," he said. "Can't have you riling everyone up." He wore a sharp white suit and held a cane, now bloody with what I assumed was my blood. He removed a handkerchief from his pocket and began slowly cleaning it. "Who the hell are you?" His voice was like cold silk. "I'm a curator of sorts. I collect things." Before I could ask another question, he grabbed me by the mouth and pulled me in closer, studying my face the way a lion eyes a zebra. "Yes," he mumbled. "This is excellent." I tried to pull away, but he held my face like a clamp. The bald man entered through the open door, his lanky partner trailing behind him. He nodded at me proudly. "Everything's just as you asked," he said. The old man, the curator, gave no response at first. He just continued to examine my face, nodding and mumbling intermittently. "Yes, eyes are good. Skin is good. Hair's all wrong, but that can be fixed." Seemingly pleased, he released my face and stood up. Yes, this is very good. You'll receive your money within a few hours. I'll contact you when I have another request. My heart sank as I realized what he'd just said. Not only would I not be able to help the girl, but I'd soon be joining her. I'd be strung up and put on display like some sort of sick art exhibit. I buried my head in my hands, hiding from the insanity of it all. I could not spend the rest of my life here. I could not. Then the curator seemed to notice something. Wait a second. He leaned down and looked me up and down. Stand up, boy, and let me get a good look at you. The tall man seemed to visibly tense at this, as if afraid of what the old man would find. The curator stared at me, his wrinkled face creasing with disgust. He's too short. The bold man spoke up. It's only by a few inches. What difference could it make? What difference could it make? Look around you. He asked, gesturing at the human puppets that surrounded us. Everything is precise. If I ask for someone who's 5 foot 8 inches, then that's what I expect. He studied their faces and seemed to realize something. You two didn't get him from that girl, did you? That girl? My heart sank as I realized they were talking about Lexi. Baldy spoke up. Her listings are usually solid. We just nothing. He snapped. I'm tired of dealing with your laziness. Get me another one. And he better be the right size this time. The old man turned away from us and walked toward the door, his cane clopping on the polished floor. Baldy jabbed a meaty thumb at me. And what about him? Get rid of him. I froze, fear paralyzing my mind. They were going to let me go, right? I hadn't the slightest clue who these people were. They could just dump me back at my house and I couldn't rat them out even if I wanted to. However, the stony look the man had when they turned to face me shattered any illusions of making it out alive. The bald man spoke to his partner in a low voice. Wait in the car. This won't be long. The tall man reluctantly obeyed, disappearing out the door and leaving me with my executioner. He cut me from the radiator and began dragging me, kicking and screaming, toward the door. I poured every ounce of strength I had into resisting, punching, and clawing like a wild animal, hysteria splintering my mind. Please don't do this, I won't say anything, I swear. My face was streaked with tears and the words came spilling from my mouth like a toddler. As I fought, I caught sight of the girl from earlier still sitting at her table. To my surprise, a bit of the life seemed to have returned to her eyes, and she was staring at me intently. She looked between me and the floor and I realized she'd dropped something. Although the food in front of her wasn't real, the silverware was, and she'd managed to knock a steak knife to the floor just a few feet away from me. I squeezed my eyes shut and pulled from the men with all the strength I could, arm outstretched to the knife. My hand was just half a foot away. Then just a few inches. The man noticed what I was trying to do and tried to grab it first, but it was too late. I scooped up the knife and plunged it deep into his stomach, warm blood spilling onto my hand. He released his grip and I stumbled to my feet, sprinting out the door on shaky legs. I emerged onto the deck and immediately caught sight of the curator, walking to his car. He turned and locked eyes with me. His face held confusion before turning to an icy rage that made my heart skip. He reached under his suit and retrieved a silver pistol, aiming it at me. I dove to the side as a deafening bang rang out, almost shattering my eardrums. I dashed around the corner as 2 more shots went off. I ran blindly toward the river, knowing it was my only hope of escape. I dove in, the frigid water chilling me to the bone. As the current carried me away, I saw the curator running toward me, pistol in hand, eyes burning embers of rage. Not wanting to hold his gaze, I turned around just in time to see a large rock that protruded from the water. I tried to swim out of its path, but the current was too strong. Pain crashed through my head and then everything went black. The rest was told to me by my nurse. She says a few good Samaritans found me washed up under a bridge and rushed me to the hospital. I told the police everything, but they were unable to locate the cabin. The river I'd been found in had dozens of smaller ones feeding into it at different points, and it was impossible to tell which one I'd come from or how long I'd been floating. They say I should be happy I escaped, but that doesn't matter. Lexi, if that's even her real name, is still at large, selling people's information online. The girl who saved me is still strung up in that cabin. And somewhere out there, the curator is looking for the newest addition to his collection.